You know, another kind of context we can bring in is an image, right? And this is I had to do a screen grab from allposters.com, you have to forgive me. But these are little Gibson girls sitting having tea. And if we had, you know, a million hours, what I would ask you to do is to imagine yourself as a student and read the image. With what I might want to do with my students is add some text to that image that surprises you, that takes it in a different direction. So we have these New York Gibson girls having tea at Rumpelmayer's in the beginning of the 20th century. And Rumpelmayer's turns out to be a chain that was started in Paris by an Austrian, Antoine Rumpelmayer. And it's still that tea shop still exists on the Rue de Rivoli. It's now called Angeline's, but it's the same place, 226 Rue de Rivoli. And it turns out to have been the favorite tea shop of the American lesbians running salons in Paris. So as this Diana Suhami's book on Parisian salons will tell you, Natalie Barney got her catering from Rumpelmayer's, and Gertrude Stein loved the Rumpelmayer's honey cake. All of which I think just completely surprises the context of the Gibson girls, which seems just really straight and virginal and Wharton-y, right? So then you might take another kind of context. This is the title page to Clarissa. Now this is the kind of thing that I think, in terms of questions, that we might want to think about teaching our students questions that they might want to ask. This is a document that is so rich for us and is so inert for them, right? Title pages are like, well, it's Clarissa. You know, they sure had messy layout back in the day, you know, and so, you know, how to teach people how to read more closely, even documents that they see as peripheral to the text itself, like a title page. All of which then can lead you to this. So if you look at now, thinking about the Skylark and Johnny Mercer and the title page of Clarissa and Rumpelmayer's as a fancy tea salon that lesbians in Paris loved. Think about now what you suddenly know how to add to your understanding of the first page of Mrs. Hill. And all the things that Woolf is, all the resonances that Woolf is setting in motion here. With that, you know, that invocation, what a lark, of a slang word that came into use in a literary period that was so important to her, right? Now I don't know if there's a skylark at the back of that, but maybe Clarissa's memories of Burton get us to that kind of misty, dusky place that both Shelley and Johnny Mercer are thinking about. Joe Bissell used to be the director of the Columbia writing program. He has an article in Rhetoric Review from just this winter that makes a really nice rhetorical distinction about context for us. And I've copied kind of the money quote for you here. I have the article as a PDF, you can get it on JSTOR. But the point is that rather than thinking about primary and secondary sources, we might be better off thinking about the use we're putting our sources to in this particular context. That is, primary and secondary sources is a shifting, it's a wildly shifting category. In a history class, Shelley's poem is going to be a secondary source that you bring in, right? In a Mrs. Dalloway class, Shelley's poem is going to be a secondary source. In a class on the lyric, it's the primary source, and Ella Fitzgerald is the secondary source. So teaching our students about primary and secondary sources is not maybe the most helpful way. So he's come up with these 4 categories. There are kind of 4 ways we use sources in academic writing. We use sources for background, and those are often sources that we don't cite at all, right? Something you might need to know about the dates of the Napoleonic Wars. Exhibit, anything you're doing a reading of, any example, right? It could be text, it could be image, it could be film, but that's your example. That's the thing you're going to read. Argument is a source that you're going to argue with, and a source that you're going to engage with in terms of what it argues, right? So it's an argument source. And method. A method source, again, is a kind of source that you may not ever cite. For undergraduate writing, the key 2 sources are exhibit and argument sources. Key to a successful undergraduate paper is, if you're engaging a lot with arguments, you need to have an exhibit that people haven't read before. And if you've got a lot of exhibits, you need to know what your argument is. So whether you start from exhibits or arguments, you need to look for the other category of source. That's the rule of thumb, that there's a reciprocal relation. I think that's a very smart and helpful way to think about how you're juxtaposing context for your students and how you're advising them in the work. So, one of the most kind of cool things that I have found in thinking about teaching, my commitment to continue to teach difficult texts in an age that seems increasingly resistant to reading difficult texts, is this neurological finding that A.S. Byatt writes about in her essay on Donne. Some of you know this little piece, it's really great. But that Byatt asked the question, why is it so much fun to read John Donne? And it's because, it is for her. And why is it so exciting to read John Donne? And she says that metaphysical poetry, this isn't unique to her, is full of puns. A pun is a double meaning. It turns out in neurology that when you think, every thought lights up a neuron, a pun lights up 2. So when a word has 2 meanings, you actually physically get a little charge. That's that pleasure, right? When you get a joke, or when someone makes a really good pun, and you do. I mean, don't you know that feeling? It's like, oh, that's so cool, right? And so I think that juxtaposing a text and a context in an exciting way gives us a physical charge. That's part of why we do this. And I think we can addict our students to this drug of thinking as physically exciting, right? Yeah, exactly. So I think this is very interesting. It's fun to think about, but I think that the juxtaposition of 2 things that don't seem to go together, and then that you kind of show them how these things are speaking to each other, is like a pun.